Thank you for checking out this episode of CTRL ALT STORY, a podcast where I have conversations with people who work in and with technology, go through their career journeys, dive into career advice, and even share some fun stories along the way. My name is Josh Spurgeon, and I'm a watsonx technical specialist at IBM. I can also be found under the name Data Nerd Josh on various social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn.
My guest today is Paula Ichniowski. She is a principal watsonx AI and data sales leader in the Southeast region. Here in just a second, I'll get her to go a little deeper on that and tell us exactly what that means. Before we get into that, though, I just want to say that Paula is fantastic. She is awesome. For some reason, she's been a big supporter and cheerleader of me over the past year that I've been at IBM. Well, she hasn't known me that long, but for the part she's known me, she's really, for some reason, enjoyed looking at my LinkedIn and my posts, and she's been very, very supportive. So I just want to start the podcast off by saying, thank you so much for that. It's extremely nice, extremely kind of you. But yeah, so there's your introduction, but obviously, want to know a little bit more about your current role and what you do and what that means, especially for those who maybe don't work at IBM and have no idea what all these weird terms might mean.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Joshua. And yes, I aspire to be your biggest stalker on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So I really love what you do and what you post out there. So thank you for that. So what is my role? So I'm actually the sales leader for the Southeast National Market for all things data, AI, watsonx. So what does that really mean? It's everything around our data fabric platform, our AI platform, our assistants, and I work with all of the sellers in the region to help them in being successful.
And just to clarify, so we do have our sellers and our technical sellers. So in your line of support is more so on just the seller side, not so much on the technical seller. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, that's correct. My role is more supporting all of the sellers. I do have a technical background, but I'm not as focused on the technical aspect of it at this point in my career.
Gotcha. And, I know that you've been with IBM and various places for a long time. So I was hoping you could really just go deep kind of on your career journey, where you started from and how you ended up here.
Sure. It's a weird kind of journey. I never would have thought, if you had asked me 35 years ago, if I was going to be in sales, I would have said, oh, heck no. I started off as a software developer. So I was writing code in Ada of all languages, working with federal programs around things like air traffic control systems. And from there, I evolved into consulting and project management. And eventually I ended up in sales. And I've been in sales for the last 25 years.
And what was that programming language? Ada? I don't think I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. So it was a very structured language similar to like a Pascal or C++.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And it was something that the Department of Defense had wanted to kind of standardize on back in the late 80s. Unfortunately, it was the compile was a little too slow, and I'm sure there's other reasons, and they kind of moved into a different direction. But that was my first job out of college, was an Ada programmer.
I never would have guessed that. So when you started at IBM, kind of how did that transition take place when your career with IBM began?
So my career with IBM began right out of college in 1988. And as I said, I was a programmer working in air traffic control systems for about 9 years. And during that time, I've lived through 5 CEOs at IBM. When I was first hired, I was working under John Akers. Then Lou Gerstner came in 94, kind of sold off this federal systems division. And then I was actually working for Lockheed Martin. I woke up one day and now I'm no longer an IBM employee. I'm a Lockheed Martin employee. So then in 1997, I rehired back with IBM in the consulting arm of IBM, the IBM GBS is what we called it, Global Business Services. And I was part of the services organization till about 2003. Then I moved over to federal for 10 years and worked in actually software sales in federal. I left IBM in the around 2016 to pursue some other options and decided to come back in 2019. So I've been back at IBM since 2019 in this role.
Well, we are definitely glad that you came back and decided to join us. So, I know that watsonx is part of your official title. So I just kind of want to get your general thought, for those who may or may not know about watsonx and may not know what it is, just kind of want to get your thoughts on that platform.
So we can't even have a conversation without generative AI anymore. I mean, that whole conversation started, what was it, around December of 2023, 2022. I think it was 2022 when ChatGPT became all of the rage. So what watsonx is IBM's generative AI platform. So it's where you can build, train, tune, deploy generative AI models. You can govern those models. It has a fit for purpose data lakehouse data store to support your AI scalability, as well as your virtual assistants to help you with your day-to-day tasks using generative AI, including things like code translation.
And, there are so many different generative AI use cases, so many different applications of it. What are some of the top things or some of your personal favorite things that you've seen, whether it's from like you kind of have two avenues here. So from like an ROI perspective for a company, what's the best that you've seen? And also just from a personal, like you're like, oh man, that is extremely cool. Kind of what are your favorite use cases or applications out there?
So one of my favorite is personally the code assistant. And the reason I like that as an old programmer, right? I mean, it helps the productivity around coding. Not only that is we've got some old languages out there, things like COBOL, where it's really tough to find a COBOL programmer anymore. It really is.
They're either retired or
right. And they were old when I was starting out, right? So so what Code Assistant does is it actually looks at the logic in the code and optimizes it and rewrites it into Java, something that can be much better maintained. And the return on investment on that, I think, is going to be significant. It's going to give companies an opportunity to modernize all of their existing legacy systems into something that's much more maintainable and continue to maintain that code base.
Yeah, and I imagine that a big part of that ROI is when you consider how much you would have to pay someone who does know COBOL to come in like as a consultant. If you didn't have someone in-house already to, take their time, maybe they're already retired, they're coming back as a consultant. And I imagine that they would have to be paid a lot of money for that versus using this assistant, and pretty much anyone can use it.
Well, exactly. Consulting firms are charging a significant amount of money. Plus, it takes a very long time because they have to manually go through all of that code. They have to look at the logic. They have to figure out what it's trying to do. And then they have to rewrite that. So not only do you need expertise in COBOL, you need expertise in a modern language to do that. So it's very costly. It's very time consuming. And this is really shrinking that window in what it takes to actually implement something like that. So it allows companies to actually modernize and move forward much more quickly.
So, in full transparency, when it comes to thinking of questions for the podcast, for the most part, I'm thinking of questions myself to ask. Like I'm not using generative AI to do my questions. However, I do occasionally have this idea where I'd like to go out to watsonx and describe the person that I'm going to interview and have it come up with a couple of questions for me to ask. So I have a couple of questions that I've actually used watsonx. I'm using the Granite 13 billion, the latest chat model. So I told a little bit of information about you that I'm going to interview and ask it to generate some questions.
Okay.
So as a principal watsonx AI and data sales leader, could you share some insights into the challenges and opportunities presented by the rapidly evolving AI landscape?
Wow.
Good question.
That's a great question, and that's a tough one to answer. I think the answer is in the question is that everything is changing so rapidly. So today, what is the standard? What we're moving towards? A new model gets released, and all of a sudden things are dramatically different, right? Because it is evolving and moving forward so quickly. AI has been around since the 1950s, right? It was coined as a task that normally requires human intellect that's being performed by a machine or a computer. And it took a long time for AI to really evolve over the last 70 some years. And now it's moving so rapidly because GPU power is there, compute power is there. We have the ability to build large language models and complex algorithms. So I can just see this whole landscape evolving even more and more quickly. I know I kind of answered your question with your question, but I think that is the biggest challenge is really how fast everything is moving and changing.
Yeah, and I think it's very important for people to kind of understand that the history of AI, that it has been around for so long. It's not like this is not something that I know, ChatGPT put it on the map in a certain way, especially in the generative AI space. But I mean, this is something that's been around for a long time. And IBM as a company has been in the AI game for a very long time, even before all of this. They're kind of pioneers in that space, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was in college working in my computer science degree, I actually was programming in Prolog and Lisp, which are AI programming languages. And, I was counting parentheses. Anybody that's listening to this, that's an old Lisp programmer will know what I'm talking about. When I started doing some research into watsonx, when I started going out and talking to clients, I was curious to see whether or not Prolog and Lisp were still out there, because I remember my professor telling us AI is happening, it's coming. And this is in the late 80s, right? So we're talking, this was 40 years ago. And I found out that Prolog is actually one of the underlying languages of watsonx.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you how long that IBM's been in the business, a very long time. And we are still using those foundational languages and those foundations of AI that have been around for a very long time.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot just a little bit. So just to kind of, this has nothing to do with your career. This has nothing to do with AI. So I have two children. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I was trying to describe this idea of a podcast to them. I mean, they don't listen to podcasts. They're 6 and 4. And I was trying to describe what it is. I'm going to be talking to people, everything. And my son was like, I have questions. My 6-year-old said, I have questions. So as I've been interviewing people, I've had a question from my oldest son, Evan, for every person. So I kind of describe a little bit about you. And then just off from his kid brain, he has a question. So his question is, do you have kids? And if you do, what are their favorite things to watch on TV?
So I do not have children. However, I do have 2 Newfoundland dogs. So I have Sage and Ginger, the Spice Girls. And Sage is about 180 pounds. And Ginger, who we call Gigi, she's about 170 pounds. So they take up a lot of space in my house. And they don't particularly like to watch TV, but they are entertaining nonetheless.
So have you ever tried putting something on the TV you thought would catch their interest, just to see if they would bark at it or jump at it or anything like that? Or
like Animal Planet on, and some animals, and they'll kind of be a little curious, but they aren't TV watchers. I know other folks have dogs that will actually very much be interested in what's happening on the show, like if they're watching the dog show or something. Mine just seem to want to sleep most of the time.
And in an earlier conversation, you've mentioned to me that at some point in your life, you would like to work with your dogs, maybe go into retirement homes. So I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm passionate about is, working with the elderly. And I have actually worked with a friend of mine who would take her dogs to retirement homes. And just the amount of joy that you see with these folks, and having to be able to pet a dog and have it, and have the dog, come to visit them and just have visitors, it really brightens their day. I just think that that's something that brings joy to me, and I would love to share that part of it with older folks. And I got to get my dog's canine citizen certified first, but that's in the roadmap.
I mean, I know I personally get excited when I see a dog, and I'm not sitting around in a retirement home or whatever, kind of a the same thing day in, day out. So I can't imagine how excited they would get seeing some random dog walk in.
Yeah, because, a lot of them had pets that they had to leave behind, and the fact that they have someone to come visit them. And it just is a warm kind of loving, dogs have no reservations, right? They'll go up and they'll snuggle with people, and they just makes you feel good. So I'm looking forward to doing something like that.
And that to me, that ties directly back to how I started the podcast about speaking to the kindness of Paula. So just want to throw that out there. And for anyone listening, I just want everyone to know that in our circle here in the Southeast region, we have the Southeast region of the United States in our market. If you say Paula, everyone knows exactly who you're talking about. You don't have to clarify the last name. You just say Paula, and everybody knows. I just want to make sure that's known. She's kind of a big deal. So.
Wow, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I don't see myself that way, but that's really kind. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, and when I approached Paula about being on here, she's like, I don't know, I'm not interesting. Well, I think I will politely disagree and say you're wrong. I think you're very interesting, had a very awesome career, and who knows what's next, right?
Absolutely.
And speaking of that, I know that you said you do like to cook and bake, so I would like to hear more about that. I believe you said something about being an amateur pastry chef.
Yes, actually, that's very true. I think a few years ago, I got out of school. I got out of graduate school. I got bored, so I started taking cake decorating classes. And that led to signing up for actual pastry classes at the French cooking school not far from my house. I started doing seminars, and then eventually I was making desserts for a restaurant for a short period of time. But then work and travel got in the way. I stopped doing that. I just do it really for personal use and with my family. But I enjoy making, French pastries, tarts, eclairs, things like that. And of course, nobody in my house wants to eat them, so I have to find places to donate anything I bake. But I really do enjoy that. It's my artistic output.
So if you had to bake one item, like you're like, this is my top item. This is like, what is your best one? Like, what is the best thing that you make? Like if you're going to enter a competition, what's it going to be?
Well, my carrot cake has won first prize in the fair. So that's one thing I do pride myself in, is my own recipe, my own frosting recipe. But one of the things that I really enjoy making, one of the desserts I used to make for a restaurant, is a French tart with a frangipane and fruit. And that's probably one of my favorites as well.
So would you picture yourself once you're like, okay, I'm finished working IBM, maybe I've reached the point of retirement, would you consider the idea of, okay, now I'm going to start being a pastry chef as well? Or do you feel like once you're done, you're probably like, I'm done and I'm just going to do this for fun?
I think I'll just do it for fun. And my focus now is also around making dog biscuits for my dogs. So that's another passion that I've started doing, is in my love of baking. I figure they're good guinea pigs to try my cooking. So
I'm thinking about future meetings, because we do cross paths periodically in person at certain like IBM events or workshops or QBRs or whatever it may be. So all I can think about is the next time I see Paula in person, I want to see some kind of tart coming with you, some kind of something. I don't know. Don't know if you get that on an airplane, but
yeah, we'll work on that, Joshua. We'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm saying that on public record. I probably shouldn't, but I'm putting too much pressure on you.
Hey, I'll do what I can. Might be tough getting it on an airplane, but we'll see what we can do.
Just walk around with it in your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
So another thing that we kind of talked about ahead of time was, I believe it was around high school girls who are interested in pursuing careers in STEM. So I just kind of want to hear a little bit more about that, kind of what you're doing and what you want to do there.
Sure. So as a female going into the sciences back in the 80s, right, there weren't a lot of women in technology. I was one of two girls in my physics classes in college. Even in high school, when I was in like my advanced science classes, there weren't as many women as there were men. So one of the things that I started working with the women in technology and girls in technology is high school girls that are interested in STEM careers, and really working with them to answer questions about what it's like, answer questions about what, kind of classes they should look at, and, what majors, how they really should pursue a STEM career, and any roadblocks that, they might encounter. So I've really enjoyed working with these young women. They're so impressive. And, one of the most gratifying things that happened is one of the girls reached out to me on LinkedIn, told me how much of an inspiration I was to her as she was continuing her path into the computer science field, actually. So love
Awesome.
Working with these young women, and love the fact that we're getting so many really talented young ladies interested in the careers of science, technology, engineering, and math.
Would you ever consider maybe starting a YouTube channel or a podcast or anything like that was kind of targeted that demographic and that topic so you could reach a broader audience? I'm just curious.
I hadn't thought about that, but I certainly wouldn't put it off the table. That's something definitely I'd like to think about. Absolutely.
Not trying to put you on the spot, but that just came to my mind as you were talking about that. So something that most people who listen to this would not know, like I said, Paula is kind of a big deal. Every Friday, she has the Paula's Friday 5. I'm doing finger quotes, the Friday 5. She sends out an email blast to, I'm not even sure who all is on the email blast, a lot of people. And essentially, here are 5 important things to know this week, or maybe 5 important things to share this week, webinars to join. In a second, I want to ask a little more detail about that, kind of the background, the history of that. But before I do that, I will say I can't remember when it was a couple of months ago, there was some video that I'd posted on my YouTube channel, and it was featured on the Friday 5. And that was a big deal to me. I was like, oh my goodness, Paula put me on her Friday 5. There's my videos on there. And I got a couple of messages on Slack. Someone's like, you're on the Friday 5. I was like, oh no, I'm on the Friday 5. So it was kind of a big deal. So I just wanted to mention that because, that was a good time. But I just kind of want to hear how did that get started?
So about 5 years ago, when I returned back to IBM and I was focusing on our data fabric platform, I was really concentrating on learning something. And every day I wanted to learn something. And then I started thinking, well, if I'm learning something every day, maybe I can help others learn something too. And so that's where it all evolved, this whole concept of Friday 5. So I started sharing it just with my immediate team members that I was working with. And then some of the folks that were in my role in other regions. And then all of a sudden, people started asking to be added to the list. And it just exploded. So I think we have about 400 folks on my distribution list now, and some of those folks share it with their teams as well. But it was really just my own personal, I'm going to learn something and write it down every week, or I'm going to, look for a video, look for a blog, look for a training. And I thought, well, this can help others too. So that's where it originated.
And for anyone listening, it's important to know that you may hear that and go, okay, well, she's just sending out an email. There is so much information at IBM. There are so many training classes. There are so many webinars, so many enablements. There are so many blogs. I mean, you literally cannot keep up with everything. It's impossible. So having all that, or a good portion of that put into one place, it's great. So, people may not think that this is a big deal, but for a lot, I couldn't track down that information myself. So, there's so much stuff. You could literally spend your entire career learning, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think people tell me that they save everything so that, if they may not need it this week, but they'll remember that it was in that newsletter. So they'll go back and search for it and find it and have what they need. So I think it does help a lot of folks.
I know it helps me. I keep all of them saved in a particular folder in my Outlook. And if I do not do anything with it, as soon as I get it, I'll always flag it, and then I'll go back to it and go, okay, is there anything that I missed? I know I try to sign it. it's hard to sign up for every, because you, like I said, you could spend your entire career just attending webinars and enablements and learning, but I try to at least find one thing from there to sign up for. I think I signed up for 2 on your most recent one, some enablement sessions. So it's very, very important. And the blog posts are key as well, because that's something that you could share with a client or share with someone else. And I know that's what a lot of people, probably what a lot of people do.
Yeah, they do. I see them posted out on LinkedIn and, sharing with other clients and everything. So I do think that, it's getting a widespread viewing.
I don't think I mentioned this to you. I've actually taken some of those posts that, are great ones to share. And I'm like, okay, I want to share these on LinkedIn. I've actually put those into watsonx and asked it to summarize the blog post for me and create a LinkedIn post out of it and include like emojis and hashtags. And then I'm able to essentially just copy paste that to LinkedIn, schedule that post, and out it goes, because, there's this long blog post and I could, I'm sure I could read it and come up with a clever post. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to let generative AI come up with something for me.
Well, guess what, Joshua? I do the same thing. I put it into watsonx, I summarize it, and I post it out that way. So it's, I think that's the new normal.
And for anyone listening to this, we keep mentioning watsonx, but we're using it internally. This is not just something that IBM is going, okay, we want to sell this to everybody. We're actually using it on our day to day. I know IBM has a great client zero story, beyond this, something that we actually are seeing ROI on. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, on the IBM client zero story.
Oh, that's a great story. So basically, Arvind Krishna, our CEO, tasked our internal folks to utilize AI to show $2 billion in savings. Now, this was at the beginning of 2023, he did this. And at the beginning of 2024, in our annual report, we were already showing $1.5 billion in savings in productivity, right? So we're on track to show $3 billion in savings over 2 years utilizing generative AI for things like Ask HR. Answering standard HR questions, Ask IT, helping with IT challenges and issues. How do I set up my iPhone? Why am I getting this error? Things like that. And we're rolling out, I think we have about 23 use cases internally for generative AI that are supporting employee productivity all around the board. And we can actually show real numbers for a large global company that we're sharing with our clients and showing them, hey, you want to use generative AI, let us show us how we're making it work internally at IBM. So I think it's a great story, and I'd love to share more of that information with clients.
And the phrase that I hear a lot of time is that we're drinking our own champagne or eating our own dog food. I'm not sure how I feel about the second one. I think I prefer the champagne one, but yeah, to me, the one that I always kind of go back to that sticks out to me is the Ask HR one. And there's a graph out there that's kind of showing that ROI over time and kind of how many of, essentially things are being deflected away from live people. They're going through the virtual assistant. And the last that I saw, I believe 94% of HR inquiries are handled completely through the virtual assistant, and they're not handled by a person. So for anyone listening that's like, okay, what does that mean? Previously you had all these people in HR who were getting the same question over and over. What is the policy for blank? How can I do blank? All these different things they're asking. Now, 94% of those things, they're just able to chat with the virtual assistant, get that information back. And that person in HR is not as burdened. They're not having to do the same thing over and over. They're able to spend that time on more important tasks, maybe get something they've been trying to do, get that kind of thing done instead of just asking those same questions over and over, and really putting a lot of their focus on those key HR questions that take a lot more digging in that the virtual assistant can't handle.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that you're not just thrown off into this virtual assistant, into an abyss, right? If it gets to a point where you're not getting the answers that you need, it will connect you with a real person, and it'll have all of your history there so that the person, that the HR representative is on, comes up to speed quickly and you don't have to repeat yourself. So good traction of the data carried forward if it absolutely has to go to a real live person to answer the questions, but I use it all the time. I use it every day. I get answers to questions very quickly, things that I wouldn't have even known how to search for, things I didn't even know I needed to know. I can find in Ask HR. So it's good to know.
And it really echoes, what we're doing in the customer service space as well. So I know Ask HR it's kind of an internal, I'm an employee, I'm using this thing. But from a customer service side for companies who have those customer interactions, we're doing the same thing, right? We're enabling them to offload from their customer service reps or whatever to let them spend more time focused on that. And then those questions are answered by the virtual assistant. So just want to get your thoughts on that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it is multi-channel, right? So we go through chat, we can do it with phone, we can do it with, multiple, interactions. And it is exactly the solution that we're working with clients on. And we are using it internally, and it's the same solution. And it only keeps getting better. We've been in that business for about 10 years with the virtual assistants. We've recently employed, and we've been a leader for at least 10 years. And we've recently started using the generative AI aspect of it as well. So it is very, very complete.
So if you had to pick just one, and you may get mad at me for asking a question, if you had to pick one IBM product and you're like, this is my favorite product of all the products, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that we have so many great ones. I do love our virtual assistant that we were just talking about. I already mentioned Code Assistant, which I think is a fantastic product. And then I would say, I think, I don't know. We have so many great products. I'm partial to the data fabric community in the sense because I've spent a good part of my career working with those products as well. So I just think we have a good solid foundation and a good solid solution around all aspects end to end for data and AI. Everything from your data stores to your data catalogs to your getting that good solid foundation of data all the way through producing your generative AI. So it's hard to pick just one, Josh.
That's fair. No, that's fair. So I do want to be, respectful of your time. I know you have an extremely busy schedule, and I'm so thankful that you're able to take a little bit of time to chat with me today. I have two more questions, and then I promise I'll let you go. So the first one is, I want to get your thoughts on IBM's point of view on AI and how IBM approaches AI, how they believe that businesses should approach AI as well. So that's my first question.
So that's a good question. And one of the reasons I like working for IBM, and I've worked with IBM for most of my career, is we're a very ethical company. And IBM's approach to AI is that it has to be ethical, trustworthy, and explainable. And I think that's the foundation for AI as we continue to evolve with AI. It has always been the foundation of what we believe and what we're building into our products and what we're working with our clients on. Absolutely has to be ethical and explainable.
Absolutely. I mean, it is so critical for businesses to make sure that they're, whatever vendor they choose, whatever applications they choose, anything in that AI space, they're built for business. They're not just picking something that's not built for business and trying to cram it in there and make it work for their business. So the last question that I have for you is just, let's say someone is wanting to get into the technical career path, or maybe they're even the AI career path, or, just in that realm, what is your advice for that person?
So my advice would be to learn everything you can. There's so much out there. You can use generative AI to ask for, ideas on what to learn. I think it's important to have a good understanding of, all of the aspects of it, right? All of, not just IBM, but Microsoft, AWS, all of the competitors out there, so that you can really understand and formulate a good idea of, how it all fits together. So I think it's, just learn as much as you can, read as much as you can, and ask a lot of questions.
I think that's great advice. All right. So like I mentioned before, I want to be respectful of Paula's time. I don't want to keep her for too long. So if you have any closing thoughts, anything else you want to share that you've didn't get to cover or anything like that, I want to make sure you have time to do that. Before I ask for that, I just wanted to once again say thank you for joining. It's been absolutely fantastic. You're wonderful, and I always enjoy getting to work with you, getting those opportunities. I'm looking forward to the next time we get to see each other in person. Whether or not you have, a tart or some kind of tasty treat, that's fine. If you don't, that's okay. I won't hold it against you.
We'll do our best to do that for you, Joshua. No, I think this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your insightful questions. And, I look forward to the next one.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.